Mexico has been a sovereign nation since 1821, but that hasn't stopped the United States from meddling in its affairs, politically, economically, and militarily. From the Cold War to the so-called war on drugs, and now, with the US troops preparing to enter Campeche, Washington's hand has been ever present in shaping Mexico's fate. For most of the 20th century, Mexico was ruled by the PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party. And while it claimed to represent the people, its leadership was deeply tied to U.S. interests. Washington feared communist influence in Latin America, and the PRI ensured that Mexico remained stable, meaning no leftist revolutions, no serious labor movements, and no challenge to U.S. corporate interests. The most infamous example is the 1968 Tlatelolco massacre. Just days before the Olympics, students protesting government corruption and inequality were gunned down by the military and police. Declassified CIA documents show that U.S. intelligence was aware of and likely supported Mexico's repression of leftist movements. This wasn't just about Mexico. The U.S. had a pattern of propping up authoritarian regimes across Latin America, from Pinochet in Chile to military juntas in Argentina and Brazil. The PRI, with its iron grip on Mexico, fit right into Washington's Cold War strategy. In the 1980s, U.S. intervention in Mexico took a new form, the war on drugs. But what was sold as a crackdown on cartels was actually a tangled web of corruption, CIA-backed operations, and violence. The Reagan administration poured millions into anti-drug operations, sending DEA agents to work with Mexican officials. But at the same time, there were credible reports that the CIA was allowing drug trafficking to fund its covert operations in Central America. One of the most infamous cases was the murder of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena in 1985. While the official story says he was killed by the Guadalajara cartel, leaked documents suggest that the CIA knew more than what they let on. But why? Because some of these cartels were working with the U.S. government to move drugs in exchange for weapons for the Contras in Nicaragua. So while the U.S. was publicly waging a war on drugs, it was also fueling the same violence that would explode into the cartel wars of the 2000s. Fast forward to today, and we're seeing a new chapter of the U.S. involvement. In early 2024, the U.S. announced its forces would be entering Campeche, supposedly for security cooperation. But what does that really mean? Officially, it's about security and fighting organized crime. But let's be real. When has the U.S. intervention in Latin America ever been just about helping? Campeche isn't just any part of Mexico. It's home to key oil reserves and is strategically located for trade routes. Some experts believe this move is about controlling Mexico's resources and setting up a long-term military presence, just like they've done in other parts of Latin America. What's worse, this intervention is happening under the guise of cooperation. But history tells us that once the U.S. military enters, they rarely leave. From the PRI's Cold War crackdowns to the drug war and now the military presence in Campeche, U.S. intervention in Mexico has always been about control, whether it's political, economic, or military. As Mexicans and as people invested in justice, we need to ask, who benefits from these interventions? How can we resist foreign control over our nation's future? The U.S. has always justified its actions as helping, but history tells us otherwise. So what do you think? Is the U.S. presence in Campeche about security, or is it something deeper? Let's continue this conversation in the comments, because if history has taught us anything, it's that we can't afford to stay silent. So you know what to do. Subscribe for more history, politics, and culture.